What's going on, guys? This is Martyrs Brigade 99 coming to you once again with another session of Dark Souls commentary. Alright guys, so this will be the first edition of the Dark Souls Remastered Battle of the Build series. Now, before we start getting into the series, what it is, what it's about, and what I intend to do with it, let's just go ahead and address the huge elephant in the room. Now, for a lot of you old subscribers, as you guys would know, I haven't uploaded a video in years, right? And because of that, I have basically lost track of a lot of the settings that would improve the quality of my videos. You know, some of those video settings, audio settings, you know, like for example, having the in-game volume settings at 10. You know, although that may be good for my Bose surround system, it's not necessarily good for uploading videos onto YouTube, because if any of you guys have listened to my last few videos, you know, there are some glaring audio issues in a few of them, right? So I've made those adjustments. This will be the last video, right, where your eardrums are basically turned into mashed potatoes, right, because I've turned the in-game volume down. I've adjusted some of the brightness settings, the contrast settings, and I've made a few other changes. So this will be the last video, hopefully, with some of those issues, because honestly, this footage is a couple weeks old. So I've made those changes, and we should be good to go from now on. Now, what is the Battle of the Build series all about? Basically, as you guys would know, a lot of players tend to follow trends. You know, especially with a game like Dark Souls, where there's a huge learning curve. There's a lot of things to learn, right, that the game does not teach you. You know, you have to learn about chain BS, you know, how to defend against chain BS, you know, locking, unlocking, the benefits of doing either, you know, how to backstab. There's a lot of things going on with this game. So with a lot of new players in particular, one thing that they tend to do is look for a streamer, right, a YouTube uploader, and they tend to create a similar build, right, because in their mind they think, well, if this person is successful, you know, it must be the build that makes them successful, so therefore I want to make a similar build, right? So we'll have like a whole bunch of Ouroboros brigades, right? There's a lot of players who use that build. Nothing wrong with it. I'm just pointing out that there's a lot of people who tend to follow trends, right? We had the Giant Dad trend for a long time. And as a matter of fact, I still see a lot of Giant Dads. Well, that was a trend, and there's nothing wrong with that. But see, back in the day, I got tired of seeing the same old builds, right? I think back then, the Dark Souls community was really lacking when it came to variety in PvP. You know, not everybody is going to be a top tier player, right? Not everyone's going to be super casual, you know. So it's good to see a wide variety of kind of everything, right? It's good to be try hard, but it's also good to have fun. You know, it's good to be super casual, but it's also good to challenge yourself, right? So what I decided to do is come up with a series where I take builds created by individuals, right? And I showcased them, talked about their strengths, talked about their weaknesses, and, you know, talked about my own build, its strengths and its weaknesses, and I went on from there. So that's basically what the series is all about, if you guys are not familiar. So, starting off the series, this is the classic 4040, and first and foremost, I'd like to thank good old J-Man 666911 for showing off his build. It's actually not his build per se, because it's a build that actually went all the way back to Demon Souls. This is the perfect all-around build in my personal opinion, because you could do everything with it. Unlike Dark Souls 3, right, capping your strength and your dexterity at 40 will give you maximum damage output. The only exception in strength would be if you're trying to use a strength weapon whose one-hand strength requirement forces you to go to, let's just say, 46 for like the demon great axe, or let's just say 50, right, for some of the dragon weapons. or 58, I believe, for the small hammer. And again, that's only if you want to one-hand those weapons. That would be the only reason to increase your strength past 40. Same could be said with dexterity. There's absolutely no reason for anyone to increase their dexterity past 40 unless you are some type of caster. May it be pyromancies, sorceries, or miracles, because 45 in dexterity will give you maximum casting speed. So again, no reason to go above 40 in strength unless you want to use a strength weapon whose one-hand strength requirement will force you to go, to, let's just say, 46 or 50. Or, again, with dexterity, no point in going above 40 unless you're a caster. So a 40-40 will give you maximum damage output. Now, there's two variations. Well, two variations that I know of, right? There's the 40 endurance, 40 in strength, 40 in dexterity with 50 vitality, right? Or there is, which is the variation I use, the 45 in vitality, 45 in endurance, 40 strength, 40 dexterity. Now, I'm not really sure which one he uses, but essentially it's pretty much the same thing. Number one, the only difference between the 5 point and endurance is, let's just say you only want 40 in endurance because you pretty much know what armor set you're going to use, right? Maybe you found the perfect armor set and you're good with sticking with it. Maybe you have a handful of weapons that you intend to use all the time. Or for you, perhaps 40 is perfect. For me, I use the variation of 45 endurance because even though it's 5 points, those 5 points will give me a little more room for weapon selection, right? Armor changes, right, based upon what weapon I use. Like, for example, sometimes I might use the Black Knight Great Axe with the rapier, right? And then I would have to change up my armor set to be able to fast roll. Sometimes I might use, maybe a Murakumo and let's just say a longsword, right? That totals, 15 units, right? So that might require me to change up my armor set, right? Maybe I can use something a little more heavier because that combination is not as heavy as the rapier and the Black Knight Great Axe. So there's a lot of things to consider. If you kind of found your perfect armor set, perhaps 40 in endurance is perfect for you. If you like to switch it up like me, perhaps 45 in endurance is a better option. Now, some of the strengths, as I said before, the main strength to this build is you can pretty much use, I would say probably about 95% of the weapons in the game. There's only a few weapons in the game that you will not be able to one hand, right? And that's weapons such as I said before, Small Hammer, right? Demon Great Axe, and perhaps 3 or 4 others. But for the most part, you can use anything. You can experiment with anything, and you will get maximum damage output. Now, some of the weaknesses. The only weakness that I see is that you pretty much have no castings. Right now, I have seen some variations where people will invest 2 points into attunement, right, giving them 10, allowing for 1 attunement slot. And that usually is used for power within, right? I've seen some people, especially when they're doing gank spanks, they may say, you know what, let me just have 1 attunement slot and I could just use power within to increase some of my damage output when I'm doing random invasions. Other than that, there are no weaknesses in my opinion. Maximum damage output. You get to use a wide variety of weapons, right? You get to experiment. Let's just say you're not really you're not really the type that limits yourself, so you can use pretty much anything, any halberd, any longsword, any dagger, any great sword, and most strength weapons. So other than not being able to cast, I think the 40-40 build is the perfect build for new players, especially for the ones who haven't quite found their perfect weapon. Now, my build is a 40 intelligence, 30 in Faith Mage. Now I have two variations of the Faith Mage, right? One variation where I concentrate more so on castings. This particular variation concentrates more so on melee, right? I use the Moonlight Greatsword, as you guys can see. Now, this build is not even finished, right? During these duels, I was like 121. I still have 4 levels to go. I only have 1 stack of Wrath of the Gods, right? I generally use 2 stacks with this build because with this particular build, I do a lot of Grey Lording and random invasions, right? And I also do a lot of forest hunting. 2 stacks of Wrath of the Gods, right? Giving me 6 casts is perfect, right? When I'm doing random invasions, because we all know there's a lot of people who absolutely need 3 phantoms, right? To beat some of these simpleton bosses, you know. Why you need 3 phantoms, I don't know, but a lot of them need 3 phantoms. And I can pretty much use anything. As you guys can see, Tranquil Walk of Peace, I can use that. I can use Force, Wrath of the Gods, Great Heal Excerpt. I can use, pretty much anything at your disposal. Vow of Silence, right? For a lot of these casters, if I'm ever doing a random invasion and I run into a caster, I can use that. I can use pretty much any miracle with the benefit of also being able to use the Moonlight Greatsword. Now, some of the strengths. Again, Moonlight Greatsword is an awesome weapon. It is used by a lot of players, right? It has effective R2s, right? Both two-handed and one-handed. The two-handed R2 is more effective, but a lot of people also mix it up with the one-hand R2s. It's pure strength scaling, right? So that's one thing that's different from Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3. So you can't really go wrong when it comes to that. Now, armor selection, it depends on your own personal taste. My particular armor selection in this video gives me 41 poise, right? So for a lot of you guys like to stack poise, this particular armor set may not be good for you, right? You have to be good with toggling. You have to be familiar with poise breakpoints, right? So in other words, like a greatsword, like he's using, I have to, when I anticipate being hit with it, I have to be comfortable with toggling, right? And really that just comes with experience, right? Knowing all the breakpoints, knowing your strengths and your weaknesses of the armor sets that you're using, right? Another weakness is, let's just say, well, for me in particular, I like to use a wide variation of weapons, right? So just being limited to the Moonlight Greatsword is kind of boring for me. Now, some of you guys may say, well, why don't you just get a Claymore, you know, and why don't you just put some enchantment on it, or some other kind of magic scaling on it. Well, whereas I do have other weapons, right, like a Chaos Claymore, and I think I have like a Lightning Halberd, I would not suggest any magic build to create a lot of weapons with those type of infusions. And the reason why I'll say that is because if you run into someone who uses Great Magic Barrier, your build is completely nerfed, right? And a lot of people don't have B plans. A lot of people don't have B plans. They just think like, okay, I'll just use the Moonlight Greatsword and I'm good to go. You know, I'll use a Moonlight Greatsword, I'll use an enchanted rapier, you know, I'll use, you know, that enchanted falchion, you know, that you get in Duke's Archives, and I'm good to go. But guess what? If you run into a cleric, right, and that cleric is pretty much prepared for all situations, once he uses that GMB, I mean, your build is going to be nerfed for like, what, I think 15 or 30 seconds. I'm not really sure what the timer is for Great Magic Barrier, but you're going to be nerfed, right? So it's always good to have a plan B when you're using this type of build that focuses on either intelligence, right, Moonlight Greatsword, or those type of enchantments. Those type of infusions, you know, occult, divine, because Great Magic Barrier nerfs those builds too. So aside from those particular weaknesses, perhaps limited armor selection, and always being mindful that you're going to need some plan Bs, weapons with chaos and perhaps lightning in the event that you run into someone who uses a great magic barrier and you might have to quick swap. Other than that, I don't really see too many weaknesses to this build. It's a fun build. I use it for random invasions. I don't really duel with it, right? But I can. And I don't really duel with it because, like I said before, I just don't like to be limited to pretty much 2 weapons. That may change. I may get some, maybe some, I don't know, a great scythe or, some of these other weapons. But that's pretty much it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this first edition of the Battle of the Build series. For a lot of you new players, I would suggest for you the 4040 is perfect for weapon experimentation. For some of you experienced players who like to use Moonlight Greatsword, but you want to switch it up with maybe Wrath of the Gods, Tranquil Walk, Great Magic Barrier, Vow of Silence, there's another build you can probably consider adding to your arsenal. So, if any of you guys have a creative build that you would like to showcase, just send me a message, drop a comment in the comment section, and hey, until next time, Martyr's Brigade is